Sultan Haji Hassanal Bolkiah and his close family members welcomed India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Istana Nurul Iman on Wednesday. The Istana Nurul Iman is the official residence of the Sultan of Brunei. Both sides held productive discussions during the delegation-level talks, where they welcomed the elevation of bilateral ties to enhanced partnership. The Prime Minister said the talks were wide-ranging and included ways to further cement the bilateral ties between the two nations. The two leaders took stock of bilateral relations, including in areas of defense, trade and investment, energy, space technology, health and pharmaceuticals, capacity building, culture and people-to-people ties. They also exchanged views on regional and global issues of mutual interest. India and Brunei also signed and exchanged memoranda of understanding.
Your Majesty, आपके भावपूर्ण शब्द, गर्मजोशी भरे स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए मैं आपको और पूरे शाही परिवार का हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। सबसे पहले मैं आपको और ब्रुनेई के लोगों को आजादी की 40वीं वर्षगांठ पर 140 करोड़ भारतवासियों की तरफ से हार्दिक बधाई देता हूं। योर मैजेस्टी, हमारे सदियों पुराने सांस्कृतिक संबंध है। हमारी मित्रता का आधार हमारी यह महान सांस्कृतिक परंपरा है। आपके नेतृत्व में हमारे संबंध दिनों दिन प्रगाढ़ होते रहे हैं। 2018 में हमारे गणतंत्र दिवस पर मुख्य अतिथि के रूप में आपकी भारत यात्रा की स्मृतियां आज भी भारत के लोग बहुत गौरव के साथ याद करते हैं। योर मैजेस्टी, मुझे अत्यंत खुशी है कि मुझे अपने तीसरे कार्यकाल की शुरुआत में ही ब्रुनेई की यात्रा करने का और आपसे भविष्य के विषय में चर्चा करने का सौभाग्य मिला है। यह भी सुखद संयोग है कि इस वर्ष हम द्विपक्षीय साझेदारी की 40वीं वर्षगांठ मना रहे हैं। भारत की एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी और इंडो पैसिफिक विजन में ब्रुनेई का महत्वपूर्ण साझेदार होना यह हमारे लिए उज्जवल भविष्य की गारंटी है। हम एक दूसरे की भावनाओं का सम्मान करते हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि मेरी इस यात्रा से और हमारी चर्चाओं से आने वाले समय के लिए हमारे संबंधों को स्ट्रैटेजिक दिशा मिलेगी। एक बार फिर इस अवसर पर मैं आपका हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
The Sultan of Brunei hosted a banquet lunch for the Prime Minister. Brunei Darussalam is an important partner in India's Act East policy and its vision of the Indo-Pacific. And now let's take a look at India-Brunei relations. It's the first ever bilateral visit to Brunei by an Indian Prime Minister. India and Brunei are celebrating 40 years of their diplomatic ties. The India-Brunei relationship is based on strong traditional and cultural linkages. Brunei is an important partner in India's Act East policy and its vision of the Indo-Pacific. The visit aims to further strengthen cooperation in all sectors. It will boost space technology, health, capacity building, culture and people-to-people exchanges. The visit explores avenues for cooperation in newer sectors, and the bilateral trade was $286.2 million in 23-24. and India imports crude oil worth $500 to $600 million from Brunei in a year. The Brunei media prominently covered the Indian Prime Minister's visit. A photograph of the Crown Prince receiving the Prime Minister at the Brunei International Airport was flashed on the front page of the Borneo Bulletin newspaper. It also covered the Prime Minister's visit to the Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Mosque and shows him sitting next to the Minister of Religious Affairs and Health Minister of Brunei Darussalam and being welcomed by members of the Indian community at the mosque. Right, so there you can see the photographs displayed prominently in the Borneo Bulletin newspaper published from Brunei of the Crown Prince receiving the Prime Minister at the airport and thereafter his visit to the mosque in Brunei Darussalam, where he met with the Indian community members as well. All right, joining me from Bandar Seri Begawan is my colleague Munmun Bhattacharya. Munmun, walk our viewers through the outcomes of those delegation-level talks between the two leaders.
Yes, Ramesh, we are yet to get the details of the MOUs that were signed in exchange. We are waiting for the joint statement, so the fine print is yet to come out. But what I would say is that there was a focus on giving a strategic direction to this relationship, because when you heard the Prime Minister during the delegation level talks, he said that he's looking forward to taking ties in the direction of a strategic dimension, because we know that the ties are not officially a strategic partnership, though we are marking 40th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic ties. In 1984, Brunei Darussalam got independence. It was a British commissionerate since 1888. And that was the year when India and Brunei Darussalam established diplomatic ties as well. So 2024 is a landmark year in terms of diplomatic ties between both the sides, and Prime Minister referred to that in his delegation level talks. And besides that, he did say that when he was here in 2018 as the chief guest, then of course that was a special year, and that was also a special moment for all Indians. He said when the Sultan of Brunei, in fact, was one of the chief guests at the Republic Day Parade on 26 January 2018. And he was, of course, among those heads of state and government from ASEAN countries. So all in all, I would say that from the information that we have so far, the focus is on defense relations, on space relations, on trade ties and commercial ties and people-to-people exchanges, on health and pharmaceutical sectors, on energy security, on cultural and investment ties and commercial linkages. So these are the focus areas. Besides, of course, there's focus on the Act East policy, as well as the Prime Minister mentioned, the Indo-Pacific vision. So these are really the buzzwords, so to say, Indo-Pacific, the Act East policy, and giving ties to strategic direction.
मैं हृदय से बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। भारतीय प्रधानमंत्री की ब्रुनेई की ये पहली द्विपक्षीय यात्रा है, लेकिन यहां मिले अपनेपन ने मुझे दोनों देशों के सदियों पुराने संबंधों का एहसास हर पल हम अनुभव कर रहे हैं। योर मैजेस्टी, इस साल ब्रुनेई की आजादी की 40वीं वर्षगांठ है। आपके नेतृत्व में ब्रुनेई ने परंपरा और निरंतरता के लिए एक महत्वपूर्ण संगम के साथ प्रगति की है। ब्रुनेई के लिए आपका वावासन 2035 विजन सराहनीय है। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की ओर से मैं आपको और ब्रुनेई के लोगों को बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। साथियों, भारत और ब्रुनेई के बीच गहरे ऐतिहासिक और सांस्कृतिक संबंध है। इस साल हम अपने राजनीतिक संबंधों की 40वीं सालगिरह मना रहे हैं। इस अवसर पर हमने निर्णय लिया है कि अपने संबंधों को एनहांस पार्टनरशिप का दर्जा देंगे। हमारी साझेदारी को स्ट्रैटेजिक दिशा देने के लिए हमने सभी पहलुओं पर व्यापक चर्चा की। हम आर्थिक, वैज्ञानिक और रणनीतिक क्षेत्रों में अपने सहयोग को मजबूत करने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। हमने कृषि, उद्योग, फार्मा और स्वास्थ्य के साथ साथ फिनटेक और साइबर सिक्योरिटी में आपसी सहयोग पर बल देने का निर्णय लिया है। ऊर्जा क्षेत्र में हमने एलएनजी में लॉन्ग टर्म सहयोग की संभावनाओं पर चर्चा की। रक्षा क्षेत्र में सहयोग को बढ़ाने के लिए हमने रक्षा उद्योग, प्रशिक्षण और क्षमता निर्माण की संभावनाओं पर सकारात्मक विचार किए। अंतरिक्ष के क्षेत्र में अपने सहयोग को सुदृढ़ करने के लिए हमने सैटेलाइट डेवलपमेंट, रिमोट सेंसिंग और ट्रेनिंग पर सहमति बनाई है। दोनों देशों के बीच कनेक्टिविटी के लिए जल्द ही डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट्स शुरू की जाएगी। साथियों, हमारे पीपल टू पीपल संबंध हमारी साझेदारी की नींव है। मुझे खुशी है कि भारतीय समुदाय ब्रुनेई की अर्थव्यवस्था और समाज में सकारात्मक योगदान दे रहा है। कल भारतीय राजदूतावास के लोकार्पण से भारतीय समुदाय को एक स्थायी एड्रेस मिला है। भारतीय समुदाय के कल्याण और हितों की देखरेख के लिए हम मैजेस्टी और उनकी सरकार के आभारी हैं। साथियों, भारत की एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी और इंडो पैसिफिक विजन में ब्रुनेई का महत्वपूर्ण साझेदार रहा है। भारत हमेशा आसियान सेंट्रलिटी को प्राथमिकता देता आया है और आगे भी देता रहेगा। हम अनक्लॉस जैसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कानूनों के तहत फ्रीडम ऑफ नेविगेशन और ओवरफ्लाइट्स का समर्थन करते हैं। हम सहमत हैं कि इस क्षेत्र में कोड ऑफ कंडक्ट पर सहमति बने। हम विस्तारवाद नहीं, विकासवाद की नीति का समर्थन करते हैं। योर मैजेस्टी, भारत के साथ संबंधों के प्रति आपकी प्रतिबद्धता के लिए हम आपके आभारी हैं। आज हमारे ऐतिहासिक संबंधों में एक नया अध्याय जुड़ रहा है। एक बार फिर मुझे दिए गए सम्मान के लिए मैं आपका बहुत बहुत आभारी हूं। मैं आपके शाही परिवार के सभी सदस्यों और ब्रुनेई के लोगों के अच्छे स्वास्थ्य और खुशहाली की कामना करता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
All right, there you heard India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement towards the end of his talks with the Sultan of Brunei, where he announced that both sides have decided to elevate their ties to the level of an enhanced partnership. He spoke about a number of agreements being signed towards the end of those talks as well. He spoke about connectivity in terms of direct flights between Bandar Seri Begawan and India. He spoke about how India wants to enhance cooperation in terms of energy security, importing oil and LNG in particular from Brunei. He spoke about space cooperation. He spoke about defense exchanges and also about the larger context of the Indo-Pacific. He specifically mentioned India's commitment to freedom of navigation in the South China Sea and the waters around it. He spoke about a code of conduct in the region and how India does not support or stands against expansionism without referring to any particular country in question. Right, let me go back to my colleague Munmun Bhattacharya, who is standing by in Bandar Seri Begawan for more on the developing story as far as India and Brunei are concerned. Munmun, there we heard the Prime Minister's statement towards the end of his talks with the Sultan. Give us, put it into context for our viewers, Munmun, if you will, about India-Brunei ties in terms of having spent the last few days in the capital city there. How would you describe the relationship as it stands now in terms of the diaspora connect, people-to-people ties, trade, investment and other facets of bilateral cooperation?
Yes, Ramesh, I would say that emerging from the press statement, there are a few important points. One, of course, like you said, ties have been elevated to enhanced partnership level. The future would be of strategic direction, is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said. And
Apologies for that disruption in the link with Munmun Bhattacharya in Bandar Seri Begawan. We'll try to reconnect with Munmun in just a bit. But in the meantime, we are getting you the visuals again of the two leaders before they began their delegation-level talks in Bandar Seri Begawan, the capital of Brunei. The Prime Minister speaking about how both sides have agreed to elevate their ties to the level of an enhanced partnership. And in the meantime, let me get you visuals of the Prime Minister's departure from Brunei on his onwards journey to Singapore towards the end of his two-day visit to Brunei, the first bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Brunei in 4 decades, where you see the Prime Minister leaving Bandar Seri Begawan for Singapore on the second leg of his visit to Southeast Asia. If you're just joining us, we are getting you the continuous coverage of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Brunei. And we're getting you these latest visuals of the Prime Minister emplaning from Bandar Seri Begawan, the capital of Brunei, for Singapore, which would be the second and last leg of his two-nation tour of Southeast Asia. Mr. Modi landed in Brunei on Tuesday. He held delegation-level talks with the Sultan a few hours ago. A number of agreements were signed towards the end of those talks, and in his press statement, the Prime Minister announcing that both sides have decided to enhance their bilateral ties to an enhanced partnership. He spoke about how both sides discussed connectivity in terms of direct flights. He spoke about how India wants to cooperate more in terms of LNG imports from Brunei. Defense was another area of cooperation, space technology, trade and investment, and last but not the least, regional security in the wider Indo-Pacific region, where the Prime Minister said that India stands for and remains committed to freedom of navigation. He spoke about how a code of conduct in the waters of the Indo-Pacific is needed, and how India supports this idea as well, and how India stands against expansionism without naming any country in particular. So there we're getting the latest visuals to you from the capital of Brunei, Bandar Seri Begawan, where the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, is emplaning for Singapore on what will be the second and last leg of his two-nation tour of Southeast Asia. Right, so while we are staying on these visuals, let me quickly recap for you the big idea or the big picture in terms of India-Brunei relations. As I mentioned, it's the first ever bilateral visit to Brunei by an Indian Prime Minister. India and Brunei are celebrating 40 years of their diplomatic ties. Now, the India-Brunei relationship is based on strong traditional and cultural linkages. Brunei, as you might know, is an important partner of India's Act East policy and its vision of the Indo-Pacific. Now, the visit aimed to further strengthen cooperation in all sectors such as space technology, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, capacity building, defense, culture, trade and investment, and people-to-people ties. The visit also explored avenues for further cooperation in newer areas as well. And just to recap again, insofar as bilateral trade is concerned, the bilateral trade stood at $286.2 million in 2023 and 2024. And India imports crude oil worth $500 to $600 million per year from Brunei. So this, viewers, was, as I mentioned, the first ever bilateral visit to Brunei by an Indian Prime Minister since the establishment of diplomatic ties 40 years ago. And the big news we are tracking here on DD India News Hour is that India and Brunei have agreed to elevate their ties to the level of an enhanced partnership. Right, see the visuals on your screen, that of the Indian Prime Minister leaving Bandar Seri Begawan, the capital of Brunei, for Singapore on what will be the second and last leg of his two-nation tour of Southeast Asia. All right, we have our colleague Munmun Bhattacharya on the phone line from Brunei. Munmun, do finish making a point before the line got disrupted, and also talk our viewers through the big outcomes or takeaways from the two-day visit to Brunei by India's Prime Minister.
Yes, I would say that the outcomes, Ramesh, are reflected in Prime Minister's statement at the Royal Palace. It gives us a sense of where the relationship stands now and what really is in store in this relationship, because he did speak about how both sides have decided to take forward their ties in fintech and cyber security, that India has shown interest as far as sealing long-term natural gas contracts is concerned. And though he didn't say what the Bruneian side has to say on this, but this is a potential area of cooperation. If it's not an outcome of this visit, India has definitely shown its intent when it comes to that. And the overarching outcome is, of course, this, that ties have now been enhanced at partnership level, and India would want to give the ties a strategic direction. He did mention Act East policy, Indo-Pacific vision. He spoke of how India would want to abide by UNCLOS, and that India believes in abiding by UNCLOS and freedom of navigation and overflight. He also said that India is for having a code of conduct for parties in the South China Sea, and that it is in favor of a policy that is based on development and not a policy that is based on expansionism. So the neighborhood must be listening very closely. Brunei Darussalam, we know, is at the center of the Indo-Pacific Circle. It is surrounded by Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, and Singapore. So it's very strategically located. It is a tiny state located on the northern coast of the island of Borneo along the South China Sea. It is a silent claimant to its exclusive economic zone borders in the South China Sea. It doesn't run into conflict with China. It doesn't assert its claims as aggressively as the Philippines would do, where we see visuals of ramming of vessels between both the sides. So it's been a very quiet or silent claimant of its maritime claims, and it hedges between the United States and China at the same time. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi making it loud and clear that as far as the whole of Indo-Pacific region is concerned, India's policy is in favor of freedom of navigation and overflight. And this would, of course, mean that there are things to ponder for Brunei Darussalam, because Brunei, as I've been saying, has been silent in its approach towards China. But there are other countries that are asserting its claims, and We know that the ASEAN as well as China, they have been in talks for many, many years now on a code of conduct for the parties in the South China Sea, but China has been dragging its feet. Brunei is also an ASEAN member state. It is also a part of those negotiations. It's an interesting stakeholder. So a very important strategic point really made by India, and this is very much in continuation of India's approach towards the ASEAN region and, of course, towards Southeast Asian region and Indo-Pacific as a whole. And, of course, the centrality of ASEAN remains an important factor for India, and Prime Minister did mention that for this region, the Southeast Asian region. Having said that, the Prime Minister also spoke of how both sides decided to take forward ties in terms of defense trade and training. So will there be defense exports by India? Will there be Make in India defense equipment that India would be exporting to Brunei Darussalam? What shape would that take? Again, the fine print in the joint statement would make that clear. As far as the space sector is concerned, he spoke of the focus now going forward being on satellite development, on remote sensing as well as training. So training has been a part of our space cooperation for some time now, because India has been training the space scientists of Brunei Darussalam. So maybe that is being taken forward. But satellite development would be a new area of cooperation. Again, we'll have to wait for the fine print to know how this is likely to move forward. The Prime Minister spoke of people-to-people ties and spoke of the contribution that the Indian diaspora has been making to the economy of Brunei, particularly Indian professionals who are highly respected here. They are doctors, engineers, IT professionals, teachers, etc. And the Prime Minister also said that soon direct flights will start between the two countries. Like I've been saying, from the 5th of November, a direct flight will begin between Bandar Seri Begawan and Chennai. That will be thrice a week. There was a direct flight earlier between Brunei Darussalam as well as Kolkata that was stopped after 9/11. There is no direct flight connectivity. So I would say that a very comprehensive discussion on a whole lot of sectors really between India and Brunei Darussalam, important from the bilateral and regional perspective.
All right. On that note, Munmun, thank you very much for that comprehensive update of India-Brunei ties in the light of the just concluded visit to that country by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. All right, time for a very short break on this broadcast, but more news coming up on the other side. Stay tuned. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds productive discussions with the Sultan of Brunei. The leaders welcome elevation of bilateral ties to enhanced partnership. Both sides sign a number of agreements. A major government shake-up in Ukraine. 5 ministers, including the in charge of weapons production, resign. Poland scrambles aircraft for the third time in 8 days to secure its airspace after Russia's air attack on Ukraine. The US files terrorism charges against 6 Hamas leaders, including its chief Yahya Sinwar, accuses them of orchestrating the 7th October attacks in Israel. And in sport, India bags its highest ever tally of 20 medals at the Paris Paralympics. So after concluding his successful visit to Brunei, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is now en route to Singapore. The ASEAN nation has been a traditional ally of India and its highest source of foreign direct investment. The visit by the Prime Minister is likely to strengthen the economic and cultural ties between the two countries. Akshay Dongre has more.
After his first ever state visit to Brunei, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be visiting Singapore on the 4th of September after a gap of 6 years. This is Prime Minister Modi's fifth visit to Singapore after he assumed office and has enthused the Indian diaspora across the East Asian country.
Our foreign policies are improved. That's what I can see, I can feel. People are, other people talking about our country. So I think a lot of positive things are happening. And I'm excited as PM is coming here. And surely all Indians will celebrate and will welcome him.
The visit to Singapore is significant as this is PM Modi's first visit after assuming a third historic term, along with Lawrence Wong assuming the charge of Prime Minister of Singapore this year in the month of May. The bilateral visit is likely to deepen relations between the two nations.
It's a very important and a historic visit. It's Prime Minister's fifth visit, as you rightly mentioned. Now, a visit very early on in his third term is really, really historic because Prime Minister Lawrence Wong also has taken office in May, and a meeting between two prime ministers very early on in their respective tenures will set the course for our bilateral relationship in the next decade or so.
India and Singapore have been traditional allies with shared heritage, history and cultural ties, along with deep economic relations. The impetus given by the Modi government has significantly improved the bond between the two nations. Besides cultural ties, the visit by Prime Minister Modi will focus on futuristic cooperation in areas including digitalization, sustainability, skills, health, connectivity and advanced manufacturing. These include semiconductors and aviation technology. Taken all together, these are likely to give a boost to economic cooperation between the two nations.
Certainly, Singapore having a small percentage of Indian and Indian origin people, they make culturally much more share of the noise of Singapore because there's so much of activity that happens which draws a lot of people. And we talk about culture, it's not only classical arts, it is non-classical arts, even the Bollywood, even yoga, even Indian Ayurveda, and all forms of Indian culture. Food is a very big part of it.
Indian community is one of the largest and perhaps most important communities of Singapore that has left a permanent mark on the culture of the country. As you can see everywhere, there will always be something that reminds you of India, of Indian heritage that you will find in the country. And while there has always been close cultural and historic ties between the two countries, now amid the changing geopolitical scenario, there is an increasing closer strategic relation between the two countries as well. And to nurture and to strengthen this relationship, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India is visiting Singapore, where the two countries will aim at significantly enhancing the close ties that the two countries share at this moment. With camera person SP Dubey in Singapore, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
And Akshay Dongre also speaks to the co-founder and chairperson of Global Schools Foundation, Atul Temurnikar, about education ties between Singapore and India. Take a listen.
India and Singapore are both major trade partners in several fields. Both the countries are collaborating in different aspects of business and trade, and education is turning up to be one of the most important sectors as far as the collaboration between the two countries are concerned. We are right now at Global Schools Foundation, and we have with us the co-founder and chairperson of the Global School Foundation, Mr. Atul Temurnikar. Sir, thank you so much for speaking with us. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting Singapore. Both the countries are major trade partners as well, and education, as I just said, that it's emerging to be one of the most important sector of collaboration. So how are you seeing the developments that are taking place?
Singapore and India have had a very, very good cultural ties all through the last 5-7 decades. We've also seen the CICA agreements coming in place, and the effects of that in terms of positive outcomes in FDI has been noticed. I think this is probably the best time for accelerating the investments on both sides. Singapore has been making investments in technology side, in technology parks, in investing in large financial institutions and various other sectors. And India has been likewise making investments into Singapore and also through Singapore into various gateways into Asia as well as Europe. One is the Make in India program is likely going to be seeing a major attraction from foreign investors. And I think Prime Minister Modi is coming here and interacting with several industry CEOs who are potential investors into India will give them a lot of comfort, because when it comes from the leadership, it's going to be bringing in a lot of comfort in terms of, okay, there's somebody we are going to look towards.
Sir, as far as the collaboration between the two countries are concerned, what areas do you see as potential to expect a boost as far as the growing ties between the two countries are concerned?
So I think I would say human skills is one very, very big sector. Singapore has the ecosystem in several industries, and Singapore needs great manpower to access to it, not necessarily in Singapore, but access to the manpower in India. And I think India has that. India has been able to achieve great achievements in the area of skills development. NSDA has been doing very, very good progress in that area.
And my last question would be about the arrival of the Prime Minister that's going to take place. What do you see around Singapore as far as the excitement is concerned, especially among the Indian diaspora?
Looking at the the sentiments that we have between the two countries, between G to G, between people to people, this visit is going to be very, very enormously seen by everyone, both in the importance of the trade side of it, but also in the people-to-people relations.
Thank you so much, sir. So that was the co-founder and chairperson of the Global Schools Foundation. And clearly, Singapore has the technology, India has the manpower and skilled labor as well. People who can, in fact, come together, both the countries can come together and realize the dream of even closer ties and better relation between the two countries. With camera person SP Dubey, I'm Akshay Dongre, DDI India.